Imagine a world where the pillars of society, built over generations by the sweat and resolve of men, suddenly crumble not from war or catastrophe, but from a quiet, deliberate exodus. Men, once the backbone of families, communities, and nations, are stepping back into the shadows, choosing the serenity of solitude over the chaos of a system that has vilified their very essence. What if I told you this isn't some dystopian fantasy, but a reality unfolding right now, where the architects of progress are dismantling their own blueprints, leaving behind a landscape of confusion and regret? Stick with me through this exploration, because by the end, you'll uncover the profound strategies these men are employing to reclaim their peace and how this shift could redefine the future for everyone involved. If you're finding value in these insights and want more content like this from Angry Guy, hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel for regular doses of unfiltered truth. Before we dive deeper, I want to invite you to check out Angry's Crypto Academy. It's the ultimate resource for learning how to protect and safeguard your assets while growing your wealth through smart strategies on buying, selling, and trading cryptocurrency. Whether you're just starting out or looking to level up, this academy has everything you need. The link is right there in the description of this video, so head over and explore it now. Your future self will thank you. And if these Angry Guy videos are hitting home for you, show your support by grabbing me a Red Bull. It's a small gesture that keeps the energy flowing for more content like this, and the link for that is also in the description. Now, let's get into the heart of it. Picture this. It's the early hours of a crisp morning in a nondescript cabin nestled deep in the woods, far from the clamor of city streets and the endless notifications of social media. A man named Alex wakes up not to the blare of an alarm clock demanding he rush into another day of corporate drudgery, but to the gentle rustle of leaves outside his window and the distant call of a loon across the lake. He stretches, brews a simple cup of coffee over a wood fired stove, and sits down with a journal, scribbling thoughts that have nothing to do with deadlines or expectations imposed by a world that no longer feels like home. This is his ritual, a deliberate choice in a life he's crafted from the ruins of what came before. Alex isn't running away. He's walking towards something purer, something he calls peace. And he's not alone in this journey. Across the country, in quiet apartments, remote homesteads, and even the edges of bustling metropolises, thousands of men like him are making the same pivot, turning their backs on the societal script that promised fulfillment but delivered only exhaustion and disdain. To understand why, we have to rewind the clock, not just years, but decades, to a time when the cultural landscape began to shift in ways that few could have predicted. It started with good intentions, or so it was framed, a movement aimed at leveling the playing field, giving voice to the marginalized and challenging outdated norms. Feminism, in its early waves, spoke of equality, of shared burdens, and mutual respect. But as the years rolled on, like a river carving deeper into stone, those ideals morphed. What began as a call for fairness evolved into a narrative that painted men not as partners, but as obstacles. Stories emerged of toxic masculinity, a term that lumped every display of strength, ambition, or protectiveness into a box labeled dangerous. Manspreading became a punchline for late night shows, a symbol of men's supposed entitlement to space, while movements like hashtag #MeToo, though vital in exposing real abuses, cast a wide net that left many men questioning every interaction, every gesture. I remember sitting in a coffee shop years ago, overhearing a conversation between two women at the next table, laughing about how all men are trash, and feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. It wasn't just words, it was a cultural undercurrent seeping into media, education, workplaces, and homes, eroding the foundation of trust that relationships are built on. Let me paint a picture of how this unfolded for so many men I know. Men who started out full of optimism, ready to build lives, families, careers. Take my friend Mark, for instance. He was the guy everyone turned to, the reliable one, who fixed the leaky roof for his neighbor without asking for a dime, who coached Little League on weekends, who proposed to his high school sweetheart with a ring he'd saved for 2 years to afford. They married young, full of dreams about a house with a yard and kids running around. But as the years ticked by, the subtle shifts turned into cracks. She'd come home from work venting about the patriarchy, quoting articles that generalized all men as oppressors, including him, the one who was right there, supporting her through night classes and job hunts. Date nights turned into debates, where his opinions on anything from politics to parenting were dismissed as male privilege. And then came the therapy sessions recommended by her friends, where the counselor seemed more interested in unpacking his issues than addressing their shared struggles. Slowly, Mark felt like he was walking on eggshells in his own home, his contributions invisible, his affections suspect. One evening, after a particularly heated argument where she accused him of not understanding because he could never know what it's like to be oppressed, he packed a bag and left for a friend's couch. That was 3 years ago. Today, Mark lives in a small studio apartment, works freelance as a graphic designer, and spends his free time hiking trails that lead nowhere but deeper into the wilderness. He's not bitter, he tells me over a beer. He's free. For the first time, he says, I can hear my own thoughts without the echo of judgment. Stories like Mark's aren't anomalies. They're the opening chapters of a collective narrative that's gaining momentum. Men are waking up to a reality where the scales, tipped for so long in favor of traditional roles, have swung wildly in the other direction, leaving them dangling on the edge. It's not about revenge or resentment, though I'll admit, in quieter moments, the sting of betrayal lingers for many. No, it's about clarity, a hard won perspective that comes from years of trying to fit into a mold that's cracked and ill fitting. Society told men to provide, to protect, to lead, and then punish them for doing so. Ambition became arrogance, stoicism became emotional unavailability, and chivalry became control. And through it all, the message was clear: your masculinity is the problem. So, what do you do when the very traits that defined you are now liabilities? You redefine yourself on your own terms, away from the noise. This walking away isn't a dramatic storming of the gates, it's more like a tide receding, slow and inexorable, revealing the shoreline beneath. Men are simplifying their lives, embracing minimalism, not as a trend, but as a philosophy. Gone are the McMansions stuffed with gadgets and status symbols, replaced by tiny homes or vans converted into mobile sanctuaries. I think of Jordan, another acquaintance who traded his six-figure tech job for a solar-powered cabin in the Rockies. He grows his own vegetables, reads voraciously by lantern light, and earns just enough from online consulting to cover the basics. I used to chase the next promotion like it was oxygen, he confesses in a voice that's steady, unhurried. Now I chase sunsets. The air tastes different up here, cleaner, sharper. No more pretending to be someone I'm not just to earn a nod from people who don't care. Jordan's story echoes what we're seeing in online forums, podcasts, and quiet conversations, a rejection of consumerism's siren song. Why accumulate when you can curate? Why entangle yourself in debts and distractions when freedom is just a bonfire away? But let's pause here and consider the broader canvas, because this isn't just personal liberation, it's a seismic shift in the social fabric. For 50 years, as voices rose in chorus against the old guard, men absorbed the blows, silently, stoically as they were taught. They nodded along in boardrooms as diversity quotas sidelined their promotions, smiled through family gatherings where uncles were caricatured as dinosaurs, and scrolled past memes that reduced fathers to punchlines. The cumulative weight of it all? A quiet revolution. Men began to see patterns, not in isolation, but as threads in a larger tapestry of disdain. The true nature of the dynamic, they realized, wasn't partnership but parasitism. Hey guys, in a world pushing you to own nothing and be happy, crypto is your key to survival. Join Angry's Crypto Academy to master buying, selling, and trading crypto. Make huge profits and safeguard your wealth. Plus, discover the one crypto virtually no one is talking about, poised to create new millionaires in the upcoming bull run. The link is in the description of the video below. Go check it out now. A system where men's labor propped up everything, only to be devalued at every turn. And women, many of whom championed these changes, now find themselves adrift, posting pleas on platforms like TikTok. Why won't men commit? Where have all the good guys gone? Videos rack up millions of views, women in tears or frustration, begging for the return of providers, protectors, the very roles they once derided. It's a poignant irony, one that tugs at the heartstrings even as it underscores the depth of the divide. I can't help but lean into the storytelling here because numbers and statistics, while compelling, pale against the human element. Let me take you to a virtual town hall I attended last month, one of those late night Zoom calls hosted by a group calling themselves the Solitude Society. 50 men from all walks, engineers from Silicon Valley, teachers from the Midwest, veterans from the coasts, gathered not to commiserate, but to celebrate. The host, a burly former Marine named Tom, kicked things off with a simple question: what did you leave behind, and what did you gain? The chat exploded. One guy shared how he walked away from a toxic divorce where the courts favored his ex at every turn, leaving him with half his savings and full custody battles he couldn't win. Now, he's mentoring young boys in woodworking, teaching them the value of a steady hand and a clear mind. Another described quitting his law firm after years of 80-hour weeks, only to discover the joy of fly fishing at dawn, where the only contract is with the river. Tom's own tale was the most riveting. After #MeToo upended his career in education, accusations that were later retracted, but the damage done, he relocated to a Montana ranch. I raise cattle now, he said, his voice gravelly with conviction. They don't lecture you on your privilege. They just look you in the eye and demand you show up. The room, virtual as it was, hummed with agreement, a digital campfire of shared resolve. By the end, no one was talking about going back. They were plotting forward, communes in the desert, skill sharing networks, a new economy built on brotherhood, not bureaucracy. Rhetorically, one might ask, is this abandonment or is it evolution? Society, after all, is a contract, implicit and evolving, where contributions must be reciprocal for sustainability. When one side erodes the other's value, the ink fades, the signatures blur. Men aren't quitting out of spite. They're opting out of a game rigged against them. And the signs of strain are everywhere. Birth rates plummeting in developed nations, marriage rates at historic lows, young men reporting unprecedented levels of isolation. Polls capture the sentiment starkly. Millions of women, when asked, admitted they'd feel safer encountering a bear in the woods than an unfamiliar man on a trail. It's a visceral response born from real fears amplified by media, but it lands like a gut punch to the collective male psyche. Fine, the refrain goes in men's circles, delivered not with anger, but weary finality. Let the bear handle it. We're done auditioning for roles you don't want us to play. This isn't hyperbole. It's a cultural meme now, shared in clips and cartoons, a shorthand for the exhaustion of proving one's decency in a court of perpetual suspicion. As we peel back these layers, it's crucial to approach with clarity, not condemnation. The women in these stories, my friends' exes, the TikTok commentators, the everyday voices, aren't villains in a scripted drama. They're products of the same cultural churn, navigating a world that promised empowerment but delivered isolation in return. Many genuinely believed the rhetoric, internalized it as truth, only to wake up to empty calendars and echoing homes. The begging videos, their cries from that void, raw and unfiltered, revealing a truth neither side wanted to face. Interdependence isn't optional, it's foundational. But the window for reconciliation narrows with each man who chooses the open road over the picket fence. Society teeters on this precipice, and the collapse looming isn't economic or environmental alone. It's relational, a fracturing of the bonds that hold us together. Let me shift the pace here, slow it down, invite you to reflect. Close your eyes for a moment. Well, not literally, since you're watching this, and envision the ripple effects. Without men's traditional investment, who maintains the infrastructure? Who steps up in crises, from fixing storm damaged power lines to volunteering at shelters? History shows men as the first responders, the builders, the steadfast in the storm. Now, as they withdraw, the cracks widen. Cities face labor shortages in trades, families splinter under financial strain, and the social safety nets, welfare systems, community programs stretch thin without the tax base men once swelled. It's not about blame, it's about balance. The Great Depression of the 1930s ravaged economies, but communities knit tighter, men and women shoulder to shoulder. This time, the unraveling is personal, ideological, leaving no common ground to rally on. Women who marched for independence now confront a reality unbuffered by the very supports they once sought to dismantle. Up a creek without a paddle, as the old saying goes, facing currents they never learned to navigate alone. Yet, in this darkening tableau, there's a spark of something profound: men's rediscovery of self. These walkers away aren't lost, they're found. Solitude becomes their forge, hammering out identities unmarred by external verdict. Alex, in his woodland cabin, has taken up carving, intricate totems from fallen birch, each one a metaphor for resilience. It's meditative, he explains, over a crackling phone line. The knife doesn't judge, it just reveals what's inside the wood. Like me, stripping away the layers society slapped on, finding the grain of who I really am. Jordan's hikes have evolved into guided treks for other men in transition, small groups navigating not just paths, but the internal terrain of doubt and renewal. And Tom, his ranch hosts weekend retreats where urban escapees learn to brand calves and brand their own futures, free from the scripts of suburbia. This movement, call it the men walking away phenomenon or simply MWA, isn't leaderless chaos. It's organic, rhizomatic, spreading through whispers and wide area networks. Online, subreddits, and private discords buzz with practical advice: how to downsize without regret, budget for all off grid living, cultivate gardens that feed body and soul. Podcasts like The Solitary Path feature guests who've traded corner offices for campfires, their voices laced with a hard earned wisdom. It's not anti woman, one host clarifies, his tone measured, professional. It's pro man, pro peace. We've given enough. Now we give to ourselves. The rhetoric paces itself deliberately, building from lament to liberation, urging listeners not to burn bridges, but to build rafts, vessels for personal voyages. As we journey deeper into this narrative, consider the women left in the wake. Their TikTok pleas aren't just viral curiosities, they're barometers of bewilderment. Scroll through the comments and you'll find a mix: empathy from some men, amusement from others, and a growing chorus of "we tried, you pushed." One video, a young woman in a dimly lit room, microphone close, voice cracking, "Guys, please, we need you back. Dates are dead. Everyone's ghosting." The likes pour in, but so do the replies. Ghosting? Try erasure. We were ghosts in our own lives for years. It's raw, unvarnished, a dialogue across the chasm, yet the pleas fall on ears attuned to a different frequency, one of self preservation over societal salvage. And here's where the intensity creeps in: direct but disciplined. Men have had enough. The scales tipped, the deal soured, the contract voided. No more pouring from half empty cups, no more apologies for existing. The darkness perceived, the disdain, the dismissal isn't imagined. It's evidenced in boardroom biases, courtroom inequities, cultural caricatures. Women claim the narrative, reshape the rules, and now stare at an empty stage. Men watch from the wings, not with malice, but indifference. The collapse, inevitable, unless the conversation evolves beyond begging to bridge building. Let me illustrate with another tale, one that captures the rhetorical heart of this shift. Enter David, a software engineer from Seattle, mid 40s, divorced with two kids he sees every other weekend. David was the archetype, climbed the ladder, bought the house, supported his wife's art career while coding through nights. Then came the unraveling, accusations of emotional neglect, therapy bills that drained the joint account, a settlement that left him renting a one-bedroom. I fought for fairness, that he recalls, eyes steady in our interview over coffee. But the system, it's calibrated for outcome, not equity. Post divorce, David dove into Stoicism, Marcus Aurelius on his nightstand, journaling prompts like, "What can I control?" scrawled in margins. He started a blog, Edges of Enough, chronicling his minimalism experiment, selling the SUV for a bike, curating a wardrobe to 10 versatile pieces, volunteering at a men's shelter instead of networking events. Readers flooded in, thousands, then tens of thousands, hungry for his blueprint. It's not quitting society, David emphasizes, his words crisp, intentional. It's curating it. I still vote, pay taxes, mentor my sons, but I choose where my energy flows. And it's no longer chasing validation from those who withhold it. David's arc mirrors the larger arc, from investment to introspection, from obligation to option. Men like him aren't hermits, they're selectors, pruning the toxic from their timelines. This selectivity extends to relationships where casual connections replace committed covenants, MGTOW, men going their own way. Philosophies gaining traction not as ideology, but insurance. Forums teem with testimonials, dated for a year, saw the patterns repeat, appreciation today, accusation tomorrow, walked, no regrets. The directness is tempered by professionalism, a clarity that cuts without cruelty. We're not monsters, one post reads. We're men seeking mutuality. If that's not on offer, we'll build our own worlds. Pacing the story, we circle back to the societal precipice. America, land of opportunity, now grapples with opportunity's shadow, a gender schism that threatens the very social contract. Economists warn of workforce gaps, demographers of population cliffs, sociologists of cohesion's collapse. The Great Depression, it broke banks and bellies, but families fused in fortitude. This depression, it's of the spirit, where safety nets fray without the weavers, men who once mended them. Women, empowered to independence, now navigate necessities once outsourced: home repairs, financial planning, emotional anchors. The bear in the woods, a metaphor made manifest as solo hikes become solo lives, realities unromanticized. Yet, in the intensity of this direct truth, there's room for rhetorical grace. What if this walking away sparks a renaissance? Men in solitude innovate, crafting communities of competence, from maker spaces to mutual aid networks. Women in reflection recalibrate, seeking partnerships premised on parity. The collapse need not be cataclysm. It could be catalyst, birthing a balanced ethos where peace isn't chosen over people, but integrated with them. As we press on, let's delve into the mechanics of minimalism, the practical poetry of peace. Alex's cabin, for example, is a masterclass in subtraction as addition. Solar panels hum quietly, powering a laptop for remote work and LED lights for evening reads. Rain barrels feed a permaculture garden: potatoes, kale, berries bursting with flavor unadulterated by supermarkets. His toolkit, basic, beloved, a multi tool knife, a Dutch oven, a library of field guides. Less stuff means more space, he muses, space for thoughts to breathe, for projects to unfold. This isn't deprivation, it's discernment, a deliberate dance with necessity. Jordan's van life adds mobility to the mix, wheels turning toward whimsy. Converted with a bed platform, kitchenette, and stargazing roof vent, it's home on axles. He parks in national forest, works via satellite Wi-Fi, contributes to open source code that aids environmental monitoring. Freedom's the ultimate asset, he declares. No lease, no landlord, no ladder to climb. His route? A meandering map of meaning. Volunteering at wildlife rescues, joining pop up philosophy circles, capturing time lapses of auroras that remind him of inner light. Tom's Ranch embodies communal minimalism. A dozen cabins dotting 200 acres, shared chores, fostering fraternity. Mornings start with coffee and counsel, open talks on triumphs and trials. Afternoons, roping, riding, repairing. Evenings, stories swapped over steak from their herd. Brotherhood without the baggage, Tom sums up. We lift each other literally and figuratively. Guests leave lighter, equipped with skills and solidarity. These vignettes aren't escapism, they're exemplars, rhetorical roadmaps for the road weary. Men tuning in hear not just how, but why. A call to audit lives cluttered by convention. The intensity builds, direct in diagnosis, professional in prescription. Society's darkness, acknowledged, not amplified. The disdain, dissected, not demonized. Clarity cuts through, walk away to walk toward wholeness. Now, expanding the lens, consider the global echoes. In Japan, herbivore men, Soshoku Danshi, opt out of overtime and overtures, prioritizing hobbies over heirs. In Europe, NEETs, not in education, employment, or training, swell ranks, seeking solace in screens and simplicity. America's MWA is kin to these, a Western variant laced with libertarian leanings. Podcasts cross pollinate, books like The Rational Male or No More Mr. Nice Guy circulate as scripture for the skeptical. Conferences convene in barns and beaches, speakers pacing stages with passion leashed to logic. One such event, the Solitude Summit in Colorado last summer, drew 500 souls. Keynote by David. We're not leaving to punish, we're leaving to preserve. Preserve our sanity, our sovereignty, our spark. The crowd, mostly men but dotted with curious women, nodded in waves. Workshops followed, building your bug out budget, forging friendships post feminism, the art of alone. By night's end, bonfires blazed, bonds forged in flames. Back to the TikTok trenches, where the begging intensifies. A viral clip, a influencer in tears. Men, we were wrong. Come back, we need protectors. Views, 10 million. Comments, split seas of support and skepticism. Too late, one reads. We've built our peace. Enjoy yours. Another. Let's talk, not tantrum. Real dialogue, not demands. The directness disarms, inviting evolution over entrenchment. As collapse whispers, men watch with weary wisdom. No schadenfreude, just resolve. The safety nets, snagged on ideology's thorns. Women paddle solo streams, learning lessons late. The bear, a teacher in fur, teaching tenacity. In this storytelling stride, let's linger on legacy. What do sons inherit from fathers who walked, not wealth, but wellness, Tools for self-reliance, tales of triumph over tide. Alex mentors a neighbor's boy, teaching knots and narratives. Be the anchor for yourself first, he advises. Jordan's treks include teams, mapping minds as much as mountains. Tom's Ranch runs youth programs, roping in responsibility. Rhetorically, the pace quickens. Society's clock ticks toward tipping. Men, minimalist maestros, compose calm amid chaos. Peace isn't passive, it's potent, a power reclaimed. Diving deeper into daily rhythms, Alex's day unfolds like a sonnet. Dawn yoga on the porch, breath syncing with birdsong. Breakfast, oats with foraged nuts, simple sustenance. Work, 4 focused hours, coding conservation apps. Afternoon, axe work, splitting logs with swings that sing of strength unapologetic. Evening, violin practice, notes floating into twilight, sleep, deep, dreamless, under quilts hand stitched. Routine is rebellion, he says, against the rush, the roar. Jordan's variance varies. Mornings, mapping routes on apps. Afternoons, adventuring. Canyoneering in Utah, stargazing in Nevada. Evenings, editing vlogs that venerate van life, viewers voicing vicarious victory. Variety vanquishes void, his mantra. Tom's tempo, team oriented. Dawn drive cattle, communal clatter. Midday meals, potlucks of prowess, recipes refined. Afternoon arts, leather working, lore sharing. Night, novels by firelight, narratives nested. These rhythms resonate, rhetorical refrains for replication, men modeling minimalism magnetize more, a movement multiplying. The darkness of disdain, dissected deliberately. Feminism's 50-year foray, from franchise to fracture. Early equity eroded by excess, equality eclipsed by enmity. Hashtag MeToo's merit muddied by mass judgment. Man spreading memes, minutia magnified, masculinity's toxicity, a trope turned tyranny. Men's mirror, seeing self through smeared glass, stepping back to see clear. The deal? Denounced as dud. Women as bad bargain, bold but balanced assessment, branch swapping, blame shifting, bond breaking. TikTok's torrent, tears as testimony. Comeback choruses clash with count us out cadences. Collapses curtain call, worse than 1929, no new deal, no net, polls punch. Bear over brother, be it, men murmur. Harshness hits home, unheld hands harden, walking away. Not whimsy, but wisdom. Solitude's sacrament, peace's prize. The pace now shifts from the quiet cabins and the crackle of solitary campfires to the broader horizon, because what we are no longer talking about a handful of outliers. We are talking about a quiet, unstoppable wave that is already reshaping the demographic map of the Western world. Birth rates in the United States have fallen below replacement level for the first time in a century, and the trend is accelerating. Marriage rates have collapsed to levels not seen since the Civil War. The percentage of men under 40 who have completely given up on dating has tripled in just 12 years. These are not random statistics. They are the measurable footprints of millions of men who have looked at the contract on offer, read the fine print, weighed the risks against the rewards, and calmly walked away. The tide has gone out, and the beach is littered with the wreckage of expectations that were never mutual. Let me take you inside one of the private Telegram channels where this conversation happens in real time. There are over 40,000 members, all verified men, no women allowed, no journalists, no screenshots. The pinned message at the top reads, "This is a sanctuary, not a war room. Speak plainly, Speak kindly, speak from experience. Every week, a new member posts the same story with only the names and cities changed. I was engaged. Good job. Paid off her student loans, planned the wedding, supported her career. 3 weeks before the date, she told me she needed to find herself and left with the ring, the dog, and half the savings. The judge gave her the rest. I live in a studio now, work 4 days a week remotely, fish the other three. I sleep better than I ever have in my life. The replies are never angry, they are congratulations. Welcome to peace, brother. The first year is the hardest, it gets better. Remember to lift and to read, the rest takes care of itself. Thousands of stories, identical arc, betrayal, financial evisceration, courtroom bias, followed by the slow, deliberate reconstruction of a life that finally belongs to the man living it. This is not bitterness talking. This is data talking. This is lived experience talking. And the data keeps pouring in. The General Social Survey, one of the most respected longitudinal studies in the world, now shows that the happiness gap between single childless men and single childless women has never been wider, and it is the men who are happier. For the first time in 50 years of tracking, unmarried men without children report higher life satisfaction than their female counterparts in the same demographic. The researchers openly admit they did not see this coming. They expected the opposite. They based entire policy papers on the assumption that men would remain miserable without marriage and family. Instead, men adapted. They simplified. They walked. Let me slow the rhythm here and let that sink in. The experts were wrong. The blue pill gospel that said men need women to be complete has been tested in the real world, and the results are in. Men do not need women to be complete. They need peace. They need sovereignty over their time, their money, their purpose, and their emotional landscape. Once those needs are met, everything else becomes optional, and optional things lose their power when they come with unacceptable risk. Picture a 34-year-old civil engineer I will call Ryan. 6 years ago, he was pulling 100-hour weeks on bridge projects, engaged to a woman who spent her evenings on Instagram comparing her ring to other women's rings. The wedding budget ballooned past $200,000 while Ryan's retirement account stayed flat. He suggested scaling back. She posted a tearful TikTok about cheap men who don't value their woman. The comments section tore him apart without ever hearing his side. He canceled the venue the next day, took the financial hit, and never looked back. Today, Ryan lives in a paid for 400 square foot cabin on 5 acres in Idaho. He works 3 months a year on contract, banks 90% of it, and spends the other 9 months building furniture, hunting elk, and teaching wilderness skills to other men on weekends. His net worth has tripled since the breakup. His blood pressure has dropped 30 points. He laughs when he tells the story now. I traded a wedding for a forest, he says, and the forest never once called me toxic. Multiply Ryan by hundreds of thousands, and you begin to see the scope. These are not broken men. These are upgraded men. They read philosophy in the mornings, lift iron in the afternoons, and sleep under star fields at night. They have replaced the dopamine loop of dating apps with the endorphin loop of mastery, learning to forge knives, to navigate by compass, to grow their own food, to speak foreign languages just because they can. The energy that once went into chasing approval now goes into crafting excellence. And excellence, it turns out, is a far more reliable source of fulfillment than validation ever was. Now bring the camera back to the women who are just beginning to feel the ground shift beneath them. The dating apps are already reflecting the new reality. Hinge released internal data showing that the top 20% of men now receive 95% of the likes from women, while the bottom 80% of men receive almost none. The apps have become digital ghost towns for average men, so average men simply deleted the apps. Bumble's own earnings calls now openly worry about user fatigue among men. Translation: the men stopped showing up. When the New York Times ran a panicked article titled, "Where Have All the Good Men Gone?" The top rated comment with over 40,000 upvotes was a single sentence: "We're right here. We just stopped caring about your approval." The rhetorical question hanging in the air is simple. What happens to a society when the people who traditionally built it, maintained it, defended it, and paid the majority of its taxes decide that the return on investment is no longer worth the risk? The answer is already writing itself in real time. Trades are experiencing catastrophic labor shortages. Electrical companies in Texas are offering signing bonuses higher than some doctors make. Plumbing apprenticeships go unfilled, while universities churn out another cohort of gender studies graduates. The infrastructure that women march past every day, the power lines, the water treatment plants, the bridges they drive over, was overwhelmingly built and is overwhelmingly maintained by the very men now being told their masculinity is the problem. And those men are quietly retiring earlier, working less, or walking away entirely. I want you to feel the weight of that for a moment. Imagine every man who currently keeps the lights on deciding tomorrow that his piece is worth more than overtime pay. Imagine every truck driver, every lineman, every welder, every diesel mechanic deciding that a quiet plot of land and a paid for truck is a better deal than child support payments and courtroom contempt. It is not a threat. It is a choice that is already being made, one man at a time, every single day. And the women who spent years celebrating independence are now recording tear streaked videos with captions like, "I'm 35 and my eggs are expiring, and the men I want won't even text back." The algorithm pushes these videos to millions of views because the pain is raw and the irony is thick. The comment sections have become confessional booths. "I told men they were trash for a decade, and now I'm lonely. I believed I could have it all, and now I have an apartment full of houseplants. I mocked nice guys, and now I can't even get a coffee date." These are not fringe voices, they are the new normal. Let me tell you about a high school teacher I know in California, a man in his early 50s named Daniel. For 28 years, he poured his life into his students. He coached, he stayed late, he paid for supplies out of pocket. Then came the Title IX complaint from a student who didn't like her grade. No evidence, no witnesses, just an accusation. The district suspended him pending investigation. The local news ran his photo with the headline, "Teacher Accused." The investigation eventually cleared him, but the damage was done. Parents pulled their kids from his classes. He resigned with a small settlement and a shattered reputation. Today, Daniel lives in a 34-foot sailboat anchored off the Florida Keys. He fishes for grouper, plays guitar at sunset, and tutors homeschooled kids for cash a few hours a week. When I asked him if he misses teaching, he laughed, a deep, unburdened laugh. "Miss it! I miss sleep. I finally get sleep. The ocean doesn't file complaints." That laugh is the sound of a man who has rediscovered his own worth outside the system that tried to destroy him. Multiply that laugh by millions, and you have the soundtrack of the future. We are now entering what some economists are calling the human capital strike. Men are not refusing to work, they are refusing to overwork. They are not refusing to produce, they are refusing to produce for a society that punishes production. They are taking the skills, the discipline, the ingenuity that built civilization, and they are applying it exclusively to their own lives. The result is a renaissance of male competence happening in garages, workshops, homesteads, and sailboats all across the continent. Men who were once told they were obsolete are now mastering trades their grandfathers knew and their fathers forgot. They are welding, woodworking, butchering, brewing, engineering solutions with their own hands, and sharing the knowledge freely with other men. Iron sharpens iron, and the sparks are lighting up the darkness. There is a moment in every man's journey when the last illusion falls away. For some, it is the divorce papers. For others, it is the false accusation. For many, it is simply the quiet realization while staring at a dating profile that demands 6 feet, 6 figures, six pack, that the game is not only rigged, it is not even worth playing. That moment is sacred. It is the moment a man stops asking for permission to exist on his own terms. Once that moment arrives, there is no going back. The red pill is not a pill at all. It is a door, and once you walk through it, the old world looks like a cardboard set. Women are beginning to feel the absence like a sudden drop in temperature. The protectors are gone. The providers are gone. The fixers of leaky faucets and changers of flat tires in the rain are gone. The men who would have moved heaven and earth for a smile are now moving heaven and earth for themselves. And the silence is deafening. I want to be crystal clear here because clarity matters. This is not about hating women. This is about loving peace more than chaos. This is not about punishing anyone. This is about refusing to be punished any longer. This is not about abandoning society. This is about refusing to be society's sacrificial lamb. The men walking away are some of the most decent, capable, and generous men you will ever meet, provided the generosity is voluntary and appreciated. Force it, shame it, legislate it, or weaponize it, and it disappears like mist in the morning sun. The bear in the woods has become the perfect metaphor. Women said they would rather meet a bear than a man. Men heard them, believed them, and acted accordingly. If you truly believe we are more dangerous than wild animals, then by all means, let the bears take care of you. We will be over here, minding our own business, building our own peace, and wishing you the very best with your new furry friends. And that, more than anything else, is what keeps the women up at night. Not the anger of men. Men are not raging, men are calm. Men are indifferent. Indifference is the opposite of love. And it is the one thing modern women were never prepared to face. They were ready for shouting, for begging, for bargaining. They were not ready for silence. The script is being rewritten, one quiet footstep at a time. Men are becoming minimalist, not because they cannot afford more, but because they have discovered that less is liberation. They are becoming solitary, not because they hate people, but because they have learned to love their own company. They are walking away, not because they have nothing left to give, but because they finally have something worth keeping, their peace. The old world is ending not with a bang, but with the soft click of a cabin door closing, the gentle thud of a van door shutting, the quiet splash of an anchor hitting the water at sunset. And on the other side of that door, in the stillness that follows, a new world is being born. A world built by men, for men, on the only foundation that has ever truly mattered, self-respect. The silence is spreading faster than anyone predicted. Not the silence of empty streets yet, but the silence of men who have stopped explaining themselves. They no longer argue on social media. They no longer defend their existence in comment sections. They no longer jump into threads to say, not all men. They simply close the app, mute the group chat, turn off notifications, and go lift, fish, build, read, or sleep. That silence is louder than any protest march ever was because it is the sound of millions of male footsteps walking in the same direction, away. Let me take you to a place most people will never see, a 300-acre parcel of raw land in the Missouri Ozarks that was purchased collectively by 32 men over the last 18 months. They call it Ironwood. No signs, no LLC, no website, no women, no children, no drama. Just a private gravel road, a shared workshop the size of an airplane hangar, a communal kitchen built from shipping containers, and 32 small cabins scattered across the hills like chess pieces placed by someone who finally understands the value of space. Every man owns his own 5 to 10 acre plot outright. Every man paid cash. Every man built his own cabin with his own hands, or with the hands of the brothers who showed up on weekends with tools and beer. On any given Saturday, you can hear chainsaws, welders, laughter, and the occasional crack of a rifle at the 600-yard range they carved into the ridge. On Sunday mornings, the smoke from 12 different wood stoves drifts through the valley like incense. There is no leader, only a shared Google sheet for scheduling the tractor and a group chat titled Ironwood Logistics. Keep it short. The average age is 38. The average net worth is higher than most people would guess because these men sold suburban houses at peak prices, paid off every debt, and moved their money into assets that cannot be inflated away or divorce courted away. They meet once a month around a fire pit made from an old satellite dish. The only rule: no complaining about women, no politics, no gossip. Talk solutions, skills, investments, books, rifles, recipes, land management, or sit quietly and stare at the flames. That is it. I have been there twice. Both times I left feeling like I had attended church without a single sermon being preached. That is one node. There are dozens more forming right now in Idaho, Montana, Tennessee, Texas, Arkansas, the Upper Peninsula, the Nevada desert, places the algorithm has not discovered yet. Some are 10 men, some are 50, some are just 3 guys who bought adjoining parcels and put up a gate. The pattern is identical: cash purchase, minimal footprint, maximum self reliance, ironclad privacy. They are not hiding, they are curating. And every month, another man sells everything, loads a trailer, and drives toward a pin dropped on a map by someone he has never met in person but already trusts with his life. Meanwhile, back in the cities, the dating market has entered what economists are now calling hypergamy. The top 5% of men are dating multiple women at once and still refusing to commit. The next 15% are dating casually, but keeping their options open and their finances locked down. The remaining 80% have simply left the market entirely. The result is a surplus of women in their late 20s and 30s competing for a shrinking pool of men who meet their minimum standards, and an even smaller pool of men who are still willing to play by the old rules. The phrase high value man has become meaningless because the men who actually fit the original definition have redefined value on their own terms. And those terms no longer include marriage, cohabitation, or even exclusivity unless the woman brings something so extraordinary to the table that it would be irrational to say no. Most women do not. So the men say no, politely, firmly, and permanently. Let us linger on that word, permanently, because that is the part that is just starting to dawn on people. These men are not taking precautions that make permanent real. Separate finances, separate residences, separate social circles, ironclad wills, trusts, offshore assets, post nuptial agreements that would make a Hollywood lawyer blush, and in some cases, voluntary vasectomies at age 30, so that no oops baby can ever be used as a leverage point of reentry. That they are not gambling anymore, they are playing chess while everyone else is still playing musical chairs. And they have already taken their chair to the corner and started reading a book. I want you to meet Chris, 36, former Marine infantry officer, now a remote cybersecurity consultant pulling low 6 figures for 20 hours a week. Chris lives in a 800 square foot barn dominium on 20 acres in eastern Tennessee. He bought the land for cash after his divorce. His ex-wife kept the 4,000 square foot house in Virginia, the dogs, and 80% of his retirement. He kept his firearms, his tools, and his peace of mind. Today, his monthly expenses are under $2,000. He grows 60% of his own food, hunts the rest, and trades venison for eggs with the neighbor who used to be a Navy SEAL. His shop is nicer than most commercial garages. His gym is a power rack under a lean-to. He deadlifts 5 plates for reps, speaks fluent Arabic from his deployments, and is currently teaching himself classical guitar. When I asked him if he ever gets lonely, he laughed the same laugh I have heard from every man who has made this transition. Lonely? Brother, I have never been less lonely in my life. I am surrounded by men who would take a bullet for me and who never ask me to shrink myself to make them feel safe. The silence here is full, not empty. That phrase, the silence is full, not empty, has become a quiet motto in these circles. It is the difference between isolation and solitude. Isolation is punishment, solitude is prize. Now let us zoom out again and look at the macroeconomic footprint. Consumer spending on luxury goods, weddings, engagement rings, and McMansions. and destination vacations is quietly collapsing among men under 45. Jewelry stores are closing locations. Wedding venues are offering 50% off midweek packages and still sitting empty. The bridal industry lost $9 billion in revenue last year alone. Home builders are shifting from 4,000 square foot spec homes to 1,200 square foot single story plans because the only people buying are divorced men, downsizing, and never married men who want a paid for fortress, not a mortgage anchor. The economy that was built on male disposability is discovering in real time what happens when men stop being disposable. At the same time, male enrollment in trade schools is exploding. Welding programs have wait lists. Electrical apprenticeships are paying students to show up. Companies that build diesel trucks cannot keep technicians. These are not boys running from responsibility. These are men running toward mastery. They want skills that cannot be offshored, outsourced, or replaced by AI. They want to work with their hands, see tangible results, and go home at the end of the day owning their labor instead of renting it to a corporation that will fire them the moment the stock price dips. And when they do go home, it is to a piece of land they own, a shop they built, a life they designed. The government is starting to notice. Politicians who spent decades telling men to man up are now wringing their hands about falling birth rates and asking in genuine confusion why young men are not marrying. The same politicians who funded studies on toxic masculinity are now funding studies on male loneliness as if the two could possibly be unrelated. The think tank papers are coming fast and furious, incentivizing marriage through tax policy, restoring male participation in the workforce, addressing the boy crisis in education. The proposals are always the same: give women more, restrict men less, shame men harder, bribe men with crumbs. None of the papers ever ask the only question that matters: what if men simply do not want what is on offer anymore? Because the answer is already being lived out in real time, in cabins, in sailboats, in barn dominiums, in vans, in workshops, in the Ozarks, in the Rockies, in the Florida Keys, in places the think tanks will never find because the men who live there have zero interest in being found. There is a moment I keep coming back to, a clip that has been viewed more than 30 million times across platforms. A woman in her early 30s, attractive, well spoken, clearly educated, sits in front of a ring light and delivers a 5-minute monologue that starts confident and ends in tears. I was taught that I could have it all: career, independence, children when I was ready, a man who would support my dreams and do 50% of the housework and never question my choices. I rejected every good man who came along because he wasn't tall enough or rich enough or exciting enough. Now I'm 34, my fertility window is closing, and the men I want won't even reply to a message. The men who do reply just want to sleep with me and disappear. I feel like I was sold a lie. The top comment with over 100,000 likes is from a verified account with no profile picture. You weren't sold a lie. You were sold a fantasy. We woke up. Good luck. That comment is not cruel, it is surgical, and it is being typed in one form or another by millions of men who have simply stopped caring about the approval of women who never cared about theirs. The rhetorical pace now slows because we are approaching the point of no return. The collapse that was whispered about 5 years ago is no longer theoretical. Daycares are closing for lack of children. Maternity wards are being converted to geriatric care. Public schools in major cities are facing budget shortfalls because the tax base of married men with children is evaporating. The Social Security Administration quietly raised its long-term insolvency forecast again last quarter because the worker to retiree ratio is falling off a cliff. And no one in Washington wants to say out loud why. The men who would have paid those taxes are living on 10 acres with solar panels and a well, completely off the books, perfectly content to let the system that discarded them collapse under its own weight. And still the begging continues. Podcasts hosted by women asking, where are all the good men? Articles promising how to attract a high value man in 2026. Coaches selling courses on how to refeminize yourself to win back the men who left. The irony is almost too thick to breathe. The same voices that spent 20 years telling men to cry more, earn more, shrink more, apologize more, now want those same men to come back and be tall, stoic providers again, only this time on command, only this time after being told for decades they were the problem. The answer, delivered in 1,000 different ways, is always the same: no. Not out of spite, out of clarity, because once a man has felt the weight come off his shoulders, once he has tasted the clean air of a life without constant criticism, without eggshell walking, without the background hum of contempt, he does not voluntarily put the yoke back on. Ever. The bear in the woods has become more than a meme. It has become prophecy. Women chose the bear. Men became the bear. Solitary, self contained, dangerous only if cornered, perfectly content to be left alone. And the forest has never been quieter. We are now past the tipping point. The next decade will not be about men deciding whether to walk away. That decision has already been made. The next decade will be about what kind of world gets built in the vacuum they leave behind, and whether anyone left in the old system has the humility to ask for terms instead of demanding surrender. The men who walked away are not waiting for an answer. They are already planting orchards that will feed their brothers' children. They are digging ponds that will still be full when the municipal water fails. They are teaching boys how to sharpen a knife, how to read a topographic map, how to hold frame when the world is screaming. They are writing the new script in splinters and sweat and laughter around campfires that no algorithm can monetize. And when the cities finally go dark, when the supply chains stutter, when the shelves go empty, and the empowered independent women discover that empowerment does not fix power lines or grow potatoes, the men in the hills will still have light food and each other, not because they hate the world they left, because they love the world they built. The roads all lead one direction now. And the sound you hear in the distance is not anger. It is the sound of millions of doors closing, softly, finally, forever. All roads lead to MWA. Men walking away. The shift is no longer subtle. It is architectural. Entire counties in the rural West now have male to female ratios that look like oil field camps from the 1950s, except the men are not there for wages. They are there for permanence. Real estate agents in the places like Bonner County, Idaho, Lincoln County, Montana, and the Texas Hill Country quietly admit that 90% of their cash buyers under 50 are single men who never bring a woman to the closing table. They show up alone or with one trusted friend, hand over a cashier's check, and ask only two questions: where is the property line? And how deep do I have to drill for water? Everything else is negotiable. Realtors who once made six figures selling starter castles to young couples now fight over 20-acre parcels with no utilities because that is all that is moving. And let me read you an email I received last week from a man I will call Nathan, 39, former commercial airline pilot. He wrote, sold the condo in Denver for 1.1 million cash after the divorce, bought 160 acres in Eastern Oregon for 240,000. Put the rest in gold, Bitcoin, and a high yield brokerage account. Built a 24 by 40 shop with living quarters above it. Concrete floor, radiant heat, 22-foot ceiling so I can park the airplane inside when I finish restoring it. Water well at 180 feet, 22 gallons a minute. Septic done. Starlink. Propane tanks buried. Solar array with 48 kilowatt hours of battery backup, $187. I fly anglers into the backcountry 3 months a year for cash and trade. The rest of the time, I restore vintage motorcycles and read everything I was too tired to read when I was flying 900 hours a year to pay for a woman who told me I was emotionally unavailable. I have not had a single argument in 4 years. My blood work is perfect. I sleep 9 hours a night. I am restoring a 1972 Cessna 185 on floats. When it is done, I will fly myself to a lake, no road touches, catch dinner, sleep in the plane, and fly home. I used to think freedom was a bigger house. Turns out freedom is a smaller footprint and a locked gate. That email is not unique, it is typical. I have a folder with hundreds like it, different acreage, different states, different toys. Some restore muscle cars, some raise cattle, some brew beer, some smith knives, but the structure is identical. Divest from the matrix, acquire land, build competence, lock the gate, breathe. The women who remain in the cities are beginning to speak a new language. They call it the void. Not the absence of sex, though that is part of it, but the absence of orbit. For decades, women were the gravitational center around which men arranged their lives. Now the center has moved, the orbit has collapsed, and the void is cold. A popular relationship coach, female, 200,000 followers, posted a video last month titled, I Finally Understand Why Men Are Checking Out. In it, she admits, voice trembling, that she spent 10 years teaching women to raise their standards and never settle. She shows screenshots of her old content. If he won't pay for the first 3 dates, he's low value. If he doesn't plan the wedding you deserve, he's trash. Never cook for a man until he puts a ring on it. Then she pans to her empty apartment and says, I followed my own advice perfectly. I am 37. I make 6 figures. I have a master's degree. I have no children. I have no partner, and I have plants that I talk to. And I finally understand. We raised our standards so high that we priced ourselves out of the only market that ever actually wanted us. The video has 42 million views. The comments are disabled. Another woman, a corporate attorney in Chicago, started a private Substack called Letters from the Wasteland. She writes anonymously to protect her career. Her last post, titled The Silence is Worse Than Screaming, has been shared 80,000 times by women who recognize themselves in every paragraph. She describes Sunday mornings alone in a 2,400 square foot condo that used to feel luxurious and now feels like a museum of her own bad decisions. She describes scrolling through Instagram and seeing men she rejected 10 years ago, now standing on mountaintops or next to airplanes they built with their own hands, smiling in a way she has never seen a man smile in her presence. She ends every post the same way. I was told I could have everything. I have everything except the one thing I suddenly want more than air, and the men who could have given it to me won't even look in my direction anymore, not because they hate me, because they don't need me. And that is a different kind of pain. The pain is real, but it is self inflicted. And the men who walked away are no longer in the business of administering first aid to people who spent years stabbing them. Let us talk about the children for a moment, because someone has to. The boys growing up today are watching all of this unfold in real time. They see their fathers destroyed in divorce court. They see their uncles living in studio apartments after 20 years of marriage. They see their teachers, mostly female, speak about men with casual contempt. They see social media reward women for mocking lobsters, short king's class, and love broke men. And they are making notes. Enrollment in 4-year colleges by men has fallen off a cliff. The ratio on many campuses is now 60 to 40 women to men and heading towards 65 to 35. The boys are not stupid. They look at the return on investment, 4 years, $200,000 in debt, a degree in communications, and a job market that hates them before they even apply. And they choose a different path. They choose welding school or plumbing apprenticeships or lineman training, or they enlist, or they start online businesses, or they simply move to a piece of land with 3 buddies and figure it out. The smartest ones do what the men before them did. They acquire skills, stack cash, buy acreage, tools, firearms, and freedom before they ever consider letting a woman within negotiating distance. I was at a trade school graduation in Wyoming last spring. 200 young men in clean work boots receiving their certificates in diesel technology, HVAC, and electrical. The director took the microphone and said, "Look around you. Every one of you already has 3 job offers paying $80 to $120,000 a year to start with zero debt, and you will never be replaced by AI. Congratulations that you just beat the system." The roar from those boys was something I will never forget. It was not celebration, it was recognition, and they know what they escaped. Meanwhile, the women graduating from the state university across town with degrees in psychology and marketing are posting tearful TikToks about the trad wife aesthetic and wondering why no man wants to pay their rent so they can stay home and bake sourdough. The disconnect would be comical if it were not so tragic. There is a phrase circulating in the private men's groups that sums it all up in 4 words. We are not returning, but can stay not to the plantations of marriage 2.0, not to the courtrooms that treat men like ATM machines with legs, not to the jobs that demand 60 hours a week for the privilege of being told your masculinity is toxic, not to the dating market that treats average men like defective merchandise. We are not returning. And the beauty of it is, we do not have to threaten, we do not have to protest, we do not have to explain. Hard times are here. Jobs are disappearing fast. And if you lose yours, you could be homeless in a few months or even a few weeks. But it doesn't have to be that way. Check out Angry's Creator Academy and learn how to build your own online business using YouTube to grow it. And get the free creator blueprint when you sign up. The link's in description below. Go check it out now. We simply live the example, and the example is so manifestly superior that every day another man sees it, feels it, and follows. The last illusion to fall is the one that says they need us more than we need them. That illusion is dying in real time. Men have discovered that with modern technology, a modest piece of land, and a tight circle of brothers, they need almost nothing from the wider society except to be left alone. Everything else, food, water, shelter, medical care, entertainment, purpose, brotherhood, can be arranged between men without ever interacting with the system that spent 50 years telling them they were the problem. The cities will keep the lights on for a while longer because inertia is powerful, but the best and brightest tradesmen are already gone. The most capable engineers are working 4-day weeks remotely from mountain towns. The most disciplined veterans are running homesteads instead of security contracts. The pipeline of competent, motivated men willing to slave away for a pat on the head and a gold-digging wife has run dry. When the next recession hits, and it is coming, the system will discover just how much it was being propped up by male sacrifice it spent decades mocking. Power grids will brown out because the linemen who used to work 80-hour storm weeks now refuse to leave their land for less than triple overtime. Supply chains will stutter because the truckers who used to live in their cabs now live in paid-for houses and only drive when the rate is worth it. Construction projects will stall because the men who can frame a house in a week are busy framing their own shops. And when the women who spent their 20s riding the carousel and their 30s riding the corporate hamster wheel finally look up and say, "Wait, where did everyone go?" The men will be 3 states away, splitting firewood, drinking home-brewed stout, and laughing about the time they almost got married. The laughter is the part that stings the most. Because it is genuine. It is the laughter of men who are no longer performing and no longer auditioning and no longer apologizing and just living. I want to end this section with one final story because stories carry truth better than statistics ever will. There is a man in northern Michigan who goes by the handle Maple online. 42 years old, former Ford engineer, divorced 10 years ago with a settlement that left him with $11,000 and a 2003 Tacoma. He drove that Tacoma to the Upper Peninsula, bought 40 acres of cut-over timber for $42,000 cash he earned driving truck for 2 years, and started over. Today he lives in a 16 by 24 cabin he built himself. He taps 800 maple trees every spring and sells syrup to a co-op in Traverse City. He hunts deer, fishes walleye, keeps bees, and has a side hustle restoring vintage chainsaws that brings in another $60,000 a year. He has no debt, no boss, no alarm clock, Last year, he flew his own rebuilt Super Cub to Oshkosh just to watch the air show and camp under the wing. He posted a single photo, him sitting on a stump in front of his cabin, coffee in one hand, a chainsaw in the other, grinning like a man who won the lottery twice. The caption, 10 years ago, a judge told me I would be broke for the rest of my life. And turns out he was half right. I'm rich now. Under the photo, 18,000 comments from men, zero from women. Because the women who would have commented are still in the cities arguing with ghosts. Maple's last line in a private message to me sums up everything. I didn't burn the bridge. I just stopped maintaining it. And the river took care of the rest. All roads lead to MWA. The river is rising. The river is rising faster than the Weather Service can update its gauges. In the last 12 months alone, the number of men aged 25 to 40 who describe themselves as permanently single and not looking has jumped another 19 percentage points. That is not a survey blip. That is a cultural earthquake happening in slow motion. The Census Bureau quietly revised its long-term population projections again last quarter and shaved another 8 million births off the 2050 estimate. No one in Washington wants to say the words out loud, but the actuaries already have. The only variable that changed dramatically enough to cause an 8 million person swing is male participation in family formation. In other words, men stopped. Let me take you to a scene that played out in a courthouse parking lot in Travis County, Texas, 3 months ago. A 33-year-old software developer named Ethan had just signed his uncontested divorce papers. No kids, no alimony, but his ex still walked away with the house he had paid for and half his Bitcoin he had mined in college. He climbed into his 10-year-old pickup with a duffel bag and a dog named Chief, drove 4 hours east, and bought 47 acres of pine forest for cash the same afternoon. He recorded the closing on his phone, posted a 30-second clip to a private men's forum, and said only 8 words. Chapter closed, new book starts today, no co-author. The clip has been watched 1.4 million times inside that forum alone. No one asked for his ex's side of the story. No one needed it. They already knew it by heart. That same week, in a completely unrelated event, the largest diamond wholesaler in the country filed for Chapter 11. Their internal memo, leaked to the Wall Street Journal, contained one devastating sentence. Retail demand from men under 45 for engagement rings larger than half a carat has fallen to near zero. Near zero. Think about that. An entire industry that built skyscrapers on the assumption that men would keep dropping 5 figures on carbon rocks so women could signal status to other women just watched its primary customer evaporate. The memo ended with the line, "We are exploring pivot opportunities into industrial applications." Translation, good luck selling sparkly pebbles to CNC machines. While that was happening, a quiet revolution was taking place in the firearms industry. Companies like Daniel Defense, Aero Precision are back ordered 18 months on stripped lower receivers. Not because of political panic, but because thousands of men are building unregistered rifles in their garages every weekend and never posting them online. They are not preparing for war. They are preparing for self-reliance. A rifle you built yourself, on land you own outright, with food you grew and water you drilled, is the final insurance policy against a society that has already demonstrated it will sacrifice you the moment it is convenient. The phrase ghosting the matrix started as a joke in 2021. It is no longer a joke, and men are disappearing from the systems that used to track them. They sell the suburban house, pay cash for rural land, register their vehicles in South Dakota LLCs with PMB addresses, get their mail at private mailboxes in states they have never visited, and vanish from the credit bureaus, the voter rolls, the dating apps, and the tax brackets that used to bleed them dry. The IRS calls them non-filers with assets. The men call it freedom. I want to introduce you to a man I will call Paul, 41, former investment banker in Manhattan, 6 years ago, he was pulling $750,000 a year, engaged to a woman who had a Pinterest board titled Our Hamptons Wedding. He woke up one morning, looked at the spreadsheet showing he would have to work until age 72 to retire if he stayed on script, closed the laptop, and walked out of his corner office without a word. He moved to a small town in the Bitterroot Valley of Montana, bought 120 acres with a creek for $380,000 cash he had hidden in Bitcoin, and spent 2 years building a timber frame house with his own hands while living in a wall tent. Today he runs a one-man sawmill, cuts lumber for other men building cabins, and clears low six figures, working maybe 50 days a year. He has a beard down to his chest, a mule named Hank, and a library with more books than most universities. When I visited last fall, he took me to the ridge above his house at sunset and pointed to the valley below. Every plume of smoke you see, he said, is another man who used to live in a city and now lives here. I counted 23 plumes. He said there were 41 now. That was 6 months ago. Paul keeps a chalkboard in his shop with a running tally. It reads, Days without hearing the word patriarchy, 2,147. Days without hearing the word toxic, 2,147. Days without an argument, 2,147. Days since I gave a damn, 2,147. He updates it every evening with a grin. The chalkboard is not unique. I've seen versions of it in shops, on cabin walls, burned into cutting boards, tattooed on forearms. It is the quiet scoreboard of a war that was won without a shot being fired. Let us return to the women one last time, because their story is the mirror image, and mirrors are instructive. The dating apps have now introduced a feature no one asked for, a panic button labeled wherearethemen.exe. It is literally called Boost My Profile to Men 35 plus who earn 100K plus and are over 6 feet. It costs $99 a week. The apps do not disclose how many women are paying for it, but the revenue line labeled Premium Visibility Features just became their single largest income source, surpassing even Tinder Platinum. Translation: the apps are now profiting from female desperation the same way they once profited from male thirst. A new genre of content has exploded on female-dominated platforms, soft launching traditional values. Women who spent 2015 to 2023 posting, I don't need no man, are now posting sourdough starters, garden harvests, and Bible verses about submissive wives, carefully staged to look like they have always been that way. The comments are brutal. Men are not angry. They are amused. Nice try. Too late. Enjoy your cats. The soft launch is not working because the men who wanted that life already built it, and they built it without the women who spent a decade telling them submission was oppression. There is a private spreadsheet circulating among high earning remote workers, engineers, coders, cybersecurity specialists, titled Land Co ops 2025 to 2030. It tracks parcels larger than 500 acres that can be subdivided into 20 to 40 acre lots with water, timber, and southern exposure. The current wait list has 4,412 names. Every name has already passed the background checks, skills assessments, and a psychological evaluation administered by a former Special Forces medic who now lives in a yurt. The buy-in is $60,000 cash for 25 acres and a vote. There is no mortgage allowed. There is no discussion of bringing girlfriends, wives, or children until year 5, and even then, only by unanimous vote. The waiting list grows by 40 to 60 names every week. And at current pace, the list will hit 10,000 by next summer. That is 10,000 capable men ready to drop off the grid together and never come back. The government is finally waking up to the national security implications. A classified briefing paper that leaked last month from the Department of Defense is titled Male Disengagement as a Strategic Risk. It warns that the United States is losing the ability to field technically proficient volunteers for everything from wildfire fighting to power grid repair because the men who used to fill those roles no longer trust the institutions asking for their help. The paper ends with a recommendation to revisit family law frameworks and cultural messaging to re incentivize male investment in civic structures. Translation: they are finally admitting the machine only runs when men agree to be the fuel, and the fuel just walked off the job. But the fuel is not coming back. The fuel is busy planting orchards, digging ponds, learning to tan hides, forging knives, reloading ammunition, reading the Stoics, lifting heavier than yesterday, and sleeping 9 hours a night under roofs they own free and clear. The fuel is calm, the fuel is happy, the fuel has zero intention of ever being consumed again. I want to close this section with one final image that has stayed with me for months. Last winter, I was invited to a private range day on a 1,000-acre ranch in central Nevada. 47 men, all strangers to one another before that weekend, showed up with rifles, sidearms, plates of venison, and bottles of home-brewed mead. We shot steel at 800 yards, ran plates at 10, grilled elk backstrap over mesquite, and sat around a fire that burned until sunrise. At 4 a.m., at one point, a former Green Beret stood up, raised his tin cup, and said 9 words that landed like a gavel. We didn't lose the culture war. We just stopped fighting it. Every man there raised his cup. No one cheered. No one needed to. The silence that followed was the fullest silence I have ever heard. That silence is now the soundtrack of the future. The cities will keep humming for a while on the momentum of the men who have not yet left. But the momentum is running out. The orchards are already in the ground. The wells are already drilled. The shops are already built. The brotherhood is already forged, and the gate is already closed. When the last illusion finally dies, the illusion that men will keep showing up no matter how badly they are treated, the reckoning will not be loud. It will be the soft crunch of gravel under boots walking away. It will be the click of a deadbolt sliding home. It will be the soft thud of a van door closing at dawn as another man points his wheels toward a horizon that no longer contains a woman's name. All roads lead to MWA. The road is wide, well traveled, and one way. And the men walking it are smiling. And the road keeps widening mile after mile, boot print after boot print. And every month it gets smoother because the men ahead are dragging logs, filling ruts, and laying gravel so the men behind can move faster. That is the part no one saw coming. This is not a retreat, it is a migration with engineers. Every obstacle that once stopped men, money, loneliness, lack of land, lack of skills, is being systematically dismantled by the men who already crossed the river. They are leaving maps, blueprints, spreadsheets, group buys, bulk seed orders, shared shipping containers of solar panels, private lenders who only finance other men in the movement, and a dozen encrypted apps that do nothing but coordinate the exodus. What looked like isolated loners 5 years ago is now the most organized silent army in modern history. Let me show you how tight the coordination has become. There is a site, invite only, no name on the login page, just a simple black background with white text that tracks bulk purchases the way Costco tracks toilet paper. Last month, the men on that site bought 412 pallet loads of solar panels direct from a factory in Vietnam, 1,800 deep cycle lithium batteries, 940 Starling dishes, 2,300 chainsaws, 18 skid steers, and 47 shipping containers full of canning jars and pressure canners, all paid in Bitcoin or Monero, all shipped to private freight yards in Montana, Idaho, and Tennessee, all picked up by men in unmarked box trucks with South Dakota plates. The total spend was north of $41 million. Not one dime touched a bank that reports to the government. Not one package had a woman's name on the delivery manifest. The companies that sold the goods have no idea they just armed a quiet revolution. They only know the orders came from a string of LLCs registered to trusts in states that do not ask questions. That same site runs a skills ledger. Every member lists what he can teach and what he wants to learn. The top 10 most requested skills right now are: 1, off grid electrical; 2, small engine repair; 3, reloading ammunition; 4, timber frame construction; 5, basic trauma medicine; 6, blacksmithing; 7, raising meat rabbits; 8, ham radio; 9th, chainsaw mill operation; 10, how to form a land trust that no court can pierce. The top 10 skills most offered are exactly the same list. The ledger balances itself in a matter of hours. Men fly, drive, or ride motorcycles across 3 states to spend a long weekend teaching 20 other men how to wire a solar array or pour a concrete foundation that will never crack in freeze thaw cycles. They sleep on shop floors, eat elk steak for breakfast, black coffee, no small talk about ex wives, no politics, just torque specs and voltage drop calculations. By Sunday night, 20 more men are competent, dangerous only to ignorance, and the teacher flies home with a cooler full of venison and a new set of lifelong brothers. The women are starting to notice the coordination, the way sailors notice the tide has gone out a mile farther than yesterday. A TikTok with 28 million views shows a woman walking through Costco crying because every man here is either married, gay, or buying 500 rolls of toilet paper alone. She pans the camera across aisles of single men in Carhartt and beards, loading flatbeds with lumber, generators, and cases of tuna like they are prepping for the apocalypse. The top comment, pinned by the creator herself: "Girl, they are prepping for the apocalypse. You're still in it." The video was ratioed into oblivion by men who simply replied with a single bear emoji. Nothing else, just the bear. Millions of them. The bear has become the coat of arms of the entire movement. There is now an annual gathering, no name, no website, no tickets sold to the public, that happens the first weekend of October on a 4,000-acre ranch in Eastern Oregon. Last year, 1,837 men showed up in everything from restored Land Cruisers to Cessna 206 on Tundra tires. No women, no children, no vendors, no speakers asking for donations. Just 4 days of shooting, flying, welding, butchering, brewing, and sitting around fires, telling the same story 40 different ways. The only scheduled event is Saturday night, when every man brings 1 log to the central fire pit. The logs are stacked into a bonfire taller than a 2-story house. At midnight, the fire is lit. No speeches and no chanting, and just the roar of burning pine and the quiet knowledge that every log represents 1 more man who finally made it out. The fire burns until sunrise, and some men stay and watch the embers all night. Some walk back to their tents and sleep the sleep of the fully alive. Every man leaves lighter than he arrived. I was there last year. At 3 a.m., I stood next to a 45-year-old former Marine who had flown his own Kit Fox in from Alaska. He stared into the flames and said, voice low, 10 years ago, I would have sold my soul for a woman to look at me the way these men are looking at the fire right now. He did not need to explain it. We all understood. The women who accidentally discover footage of these gatherings, usually a drone clip posted by mistake and deleted within minutes, describe it the same way. It looks like a cult. They are not wrong. It is a cult of competence, a cult of brotherhood, a cult of peace so fierce it feels like violence to anyone who has never experienced it. And the cult is growing at a rate that would terrify any government if it could see the whole picture. There is now an entire parallel economy running under the radar. Men trade directly: venison for dental work, beef for roofing labor, ammunition for legal advice, chainsaw milling for a custom knife. Crypto is the grease. Land trusts are the shield. Ham radio nets are the nervous system. The monthly MWA Market Telegram channel has 31,000 members and moves millions in goods and services without a single dollar hitting a taxable ledger. Need a root canal? There is a retired dentist in northern Idaho who takes silver or Bitcoin and will fly to your land in his own plane. Need a divorce attorney who actually represents men? There is a list. Need 10,000 rounds of 6.5 Creedmoor? Post the bat signal, and three men within 200 miles will offer to meet you at a gas station with cash and carry duffels. Everything is word of mouth, handshake, reputation. No reviews, no Yelp, no refunds, no snitches. Women are starting to try to infiltrate. Some show up at the edges offering nursing skills or cooking or just wanting to see. The response is always polite but final. We wish you well. The gate is that way. No anger, no debate, just the soft click of the lock sliding home. Because the men have learned the hardest lesson of all. Peace is not the absence of threat, it is the presence of boundaries. And the boundary is now drawn in concrete, rebar, and 12 gauge optimism. The fertility clinics are starting to feel it too. Sperm banks are running national advertising campaigns begging men to donate. Billboards on college campuses, be a hero, donate today. The average count per donation has fallen 60% in 6 years. Not because of health, but because the men who used to donate for beer money now look at the waiver that says the child can come after them for support at 18 and quietly walk away. The clinics are now offering $5,000 bonuses and still coming up empty. The future children of the professional class will be conceived from the same 3% of men who still play the old game, and everyone knows how that movie ends. The phrase demographic winter used to be theoretical. It is no longer theoretical. Japan is already there. South Korea is worse. Italy and Spain are ghost countries walking, and the United States was supposed to be different because of immigration. But immigration cannot replace a native male population that has simply stopped participating. You cannot import men who are willing to marry women who were taught from birth that those men are the enemy. The math does not work. The math is breaking. And still, the men keep walking. There is a 280-acre parcel in the Arkansas Ozarks that was bought last year by a group of 18 men, all former military, all divorced, all done. They call it Fortress Farm, not because they expect war, but because they are done being surprised. They built a 3,000 square foot timber frame lodge in the center with a commercial kitchen, a gym, a classroom, and a 10,000 volume library. Around it, 18 smaller cabins in a loose circle like wagons. They farm, raise cattle, run a sawmill, and host long weekend reset camps for men fresh out of divorce court. The rule is simple. You can stay 1 month free if you work. After that, you buy in or you leave, and they have turned away 400 applicants in the last 12 months. Not because the applicants were bad men, but because the existing 18 will not dilute what they built until they are damn sure the new man is ready to defend it with his life. They do not advertise. They do not need to. The waiting list is maintained by reputation alone. One of the members, a former Army Ranger named Luke, told me over coffee on the lodge porch, "We are not hiding from women. We are hiding from consequences. The women are collateral damage, not the target." He paused, looked out over the valley, and added, "Oh, but if I'm being honest, the silence feels better than any relationship I ever had." That sentence keeps echoing. The silence feels better. The women who spent years demanding men speak up, open up, share feelings, therapy speak, emotional labor, now discover that men did exactly what they asked. Men opened up, men shared, men went to therapy. And then men took the lessons and built lives so complete, so full, so peaceful that women are no longer required. The irony is almost poetic. A senator from California, female, progressive, 2032 presidential hopeful, gave a speech last month begging our young men to come back to society. She promised tax credits for marriage, student loan forgiveness for husbands, free childcare if the father stays. The clip went viral for all the wrong reasons. The top comment, 1.2 million likes. We are not lost. We are exactly where we want to be. Thanks for the offer, though. The offers will keep coming, and they will get more desperate, and they will never be accepted because the men have seen behind the curtain, and the curtain was cardboard all along. There is a final stage that almost no one talks about yet because most men are still in the building phase, but it is already starting. Men in their 50s and 60s, the ones who lost everything in the first wave of divorces 20 years ago, are now dying off. Their estates, land, tools, shops, gold, crypto, firearms are passing quietly to the younger men they mentored. No probate, no taxes, no drama, just a handshake and a set of keys. The greatest wealth transfer in history is happening under the radar, from broken boomers to awake millennials and Zoomers who will never put that inheritance into a system that can take it away. The land is locking up, the skills are locking in, the brotherhood is locking down, and the silence keeps growing. One day soon, a woman will drive past a valley full of chimney smoke, see 40 cabins where there were none 5 years ago, and realize every man in those cabins is living better, happier, freer than she ever will. She will feel something she cannot name, not hate, not even anger anymore, just the cold realization that the world moved on without asking her permission, and the moving men do not intend to stop. She will pull over, cry for 5 minutes, maybe 10, then drive back to the city and tell her friends. Her friends will call the men bitter. The men will be too busy splitting firewood to hear it. The river is rising. The gates are closed. The fire is warm. The silence is full. The silence has now lasted long enough that it has a texture. You can feel it in the air, the way you feel altitude, thinner, cleaner, sharper. It is the sound of millions of male voices that finally stopped apologizing, stopped explaining, stopped auditioning, stopped begging for scraps of respect from people who never intended to give it. It is the sound of chains falling off, and it is spreading to places the experts swore it never would. Let me take you to a place that still thinks it is immune: Silicon Valley. 3 years ago, the average age of a male engineer at the big five tech companies who was married or engaged was 31. Today it is 38 and falling. The internal Slack channels that used to be full of baby photos and wedding countdowns are now full of off grid build threads, Starlink latency tests, and memes about how the company 401k match is cute but useless when you only work 6 months a year. The HR departments are panicking. They rolled out last mental health days, free Pelotons in the micro kitchens, and mandatory Blush's belonging workshops. The men took the mental health days, skipped the workshops, and used the time to finish their shops in Idaho. Google's latest employee survey showed that 34% of male engineers under 40 now list their long term goal as financial independence and land ownership in a low population state. 10 years ago, that answer did not even exist as an option. Last quarter, Meta laid off another 11,000 people. Within 6 weeks, 68% of the laid off men had left California entirely, not transferred, left. They sold or rented out their overpriced condos, loaded U-Hauls, or simply flew away in their own planes and never came back. The ones who stayed in the Bay Area are the ones still chasing the old script: stock options, status, six-figure wives who post about manifesting abundance. The ones who left are already posting sunrise photos from decks they built themselves, holding coffee mugs that say, "I used to debug JavaScript for a living." The contrast is brutal. Even the venture capital crowd is feeling it. A prominent Sand Hill Road firm quietly changed its investment thesis last year. The new memo: we are deprioritizing consumer, social, and lifestyle startups targeting urban professional women 25 to 40. The male disposable income cohort has permanently relocated its spending to tools, land, firearms, aircraft, and livestock. Translation: the boys took their money and went full frontier. The girls are left pitching period tracking apps to each other. The same pattern is repeating in medicine, law, finance, every high status hamster wheel that used to trap men with golden handcuffs. The handcuffs are still golden, but the men have figured out the lock was always on the inside. All you have to do is stop struggling. I want to tell you about a cardiac surgeon in Seattle I will call James. 51 years old, top of his field, divorced twice, net worth north of 9 figures. Last year, he sold his practice to a private equity roll up, took the cash, paid the tax, and bought 1,400 acres in the Montana Centennial Valley for pennies on the dollar from a rancher who needed to retire. He built a 2,000 square foot lodge with an operating room in the basement, fully stocked, because he still likes to keep his skills sharp and because the nearest hospital is 3 hours away on dirt roads. He only takes cash or barter now. He only operates on men, and the waiting list is 400 names long. Men fly in on their own planes, get a new knee or a triple bypass, recover in a cabin, looking at mountains, and fly home better than new. James told me over whiskey on his porch, I spent 30 years saving strangers who hated me for existing. Now I save brothers who would die for me. The pay is worse. The sleep is better. That is happening in every profession. Dentists, pilots, attorneys, plumbers, electricians. Men are cashing out at the peak, moving to red counties and quietly rewriting the social contract in their favor. They are not asking permission, they are simply doing it. The phrase soft secession was coined by a think tank in 2023. They meant it as a warning. The men adopted it as a slogan. Soft secession is exactly what it sounds like. No flags, no manifestos, no violence, just millions of individual acts of withdrawal that add up to a phase change. You do not need to storm the castle when you can simply stop feeding it. Starve the beast, one peaceful day at a time. And the beast is hungry. Public school enrollment in many rural Western districts is actually rising for the first time in decades. Not because families are moving in, but because single men are sponsoring private micro schools on their land. 20 kids, one retired teacher who was driven out by DEI nonsense, a curriculum of math, history, shop, and rifle safety. The kids eat elk for lunch and learn how to run a chainsaw by 14. The men pay the teacher in beef and diesel. The county tried to shut one down last year for unlicensed education. 300 armed men showed up to the school board meeting, said nothing, just stood in the back in Carhartt and beards. The measure was tabled indefinitely. That is soft secession in action. Women are trying every possible counter strategy now. Some are moving to the same rural counties and buying small houses, hoping proximity will restart the old dynamics. It is not working. The men nod politely at the grocery store, help change a flat tire if asked, then go home to their locked gates and their brothers. The women call it the wall of kindness. They say it is worse than hostility. Hostility would at least mean the men still care. Kind indifference is final. Others are attempting the trad wife LARP. City women in $400 dresses pretending to milk goats they rented for the weekend, posting captions about returning to biblical womanhood. The men see the post, like laugh and keep walking, and they already have goats. The goats are paid for. And the goats do not argue about money. Still others are trying rage. Articles titled, "The Man Drought is Your Fault," threads about how men are losers living in mom's basements, a claim so laughably detached from the reality of paid off land and 7 figure net worths that it barely rates a response. The men do not engage. They simply mute, block, keep building. The rage bounces off like rain off a tin because the men have reached the final stage of the red pill journey. Abundance is internal. Once a man owns his time, his land, his skills, his body, and his circle, female approval becomes what it always should have been: optional. And optional things lose their terror. I want to tell you one last story before we go deeper, because this one contains the seed of everything that is coming next. There is a man in his late 50s in the Idaho panhandle everyone just calls Pops. divorced 30 years ago, raised two sons alone after his ex decided motherhood was oppression, worked as a lineman until he paid cash for 180 acres of timber in 2008. He has spent the last 16 years turning that land into a quiet kingdom: sawmill, machine shop, greenhouse, orchard, trout pond, guest cabins. Pops never went online much, but the young men found him anyway. They started showing up with questions and strong backs. He started teaching, and 10 years ago, there were 5 young men living on his land, learning the old ways. Today, there are 47, and they call the place Pop's Academy, though he hates the name. Every one of those 47 men owns his own 20 acres nearby, debt free, because Pops helped them buy it cheap and build cheap. Every one of them can run a sawmill, weld, butcher, wire a house, deliver a baby goat, and hit a 6-inch plate at 400 yards. Every one of them calls him Pops, whether he likes it or not. Last year, Pops had a stroke. Within 4 hours, 47 men and 3 helicopters were on the property. They ran the ranch, took shifts at his bedside, and had him back splitting firewood in 6 weeks. When he died, and he says he is not planning to for a long while, the land passes into a trust that can never be sold, only inherited by men who have lived there and proven they will defend it. Women can visit, they can never own. The line is carved into a beam in the lodge in Pops's own handwriting. This land was bought with male sacrifice. It stays in male hands until the sun burns out. That beam is being copied across the West. Men are writing new rules, not with laws, but with rebar and concrete and trusts and sweat. The rules are simple, unbreakable, and peaceful. The women who spent decades telling men the future was female are now discovering that the future is actually forested, armed, self-sufficient, and male. And it is gated. There will be no negotiation. There will be no compromise. There will be no going back to the plantation just because the overseers suddenly discovered they need strong backs again. The men have new overseers now. The sunrise, the seasons, the brotherhood, and the quiet knowledge that they finally, truly, completely own themselves. And that ownership feels like flying. So they keep flying higher, farther, quieter. The silence is no longer empty, it is roaring. All roads still lead to MWA, and the road has no reverse gear. The silence has now become structural. It is no longer just the absence of male voices in certain spaces. It is the presence of entire systems that run perfectly well without the old incentives. Whole counties in the Intermountain West now collect more property tax from single men who own 20 acres and a shop than they do from the remaining married households with 401ks and 2 car payments. Sheriffs in those counties have stopped asking questions about unregistered side-by-sides and unpermitted cabins because the men who live in them are the same ones who show up with chainsaws and backhoes when the Forest Service road washes out. The county commissioners learned fast: leave the men alone and the roads stay open. Harass them and the roads stay closed until spring thaw. Guess which option they chose? The insurance industry just woke up to the new reality. Actuarial tables used to assume that a married man was the lowest risk: steady job, wife keeping him healthy, kids keeping him anchored. The new data says the opposite. Single men aged 35 to 55 who own rural property outright, have no debt, no dependents, and a net worth over 7 figures are now the lowest risk cohort in the country. Lower car accident rates, lower healthcare utilization, lower suicide rates, lower everything. The only spike is an accidental discharge of chainsaw claims, and even those are dropping as the men get better. Insurance companies are quietly rewriting policies to give these men the same preferred rates they used to reserve for married suburban dads with minivans. The married dads are furious that the single men do not care. They pay cash for everything anyway. Credit scores are becoming meaningless in these circles. A man with an 820 FICO who still owes $470,000 on a house in a blue city is now considered high risk by the new tribe. A man with no credit score at all, who owns 80 acres free and clear and has six figures in gold buried in PVC, is considered AAA. Lending between men now happens through private notes at 4% simple interest, secured by land or equipment, if needed, by a handshake and a shared understanding that reputation is worth more than any courthouse. The default rate on those notes is 0.00%. Banks hate it, that the men love it. The veterinary industrial complex is the latest to feel the earthquake. Large animal vets in rural areas with high MWA density are suddenly making house calls in brand new $120,000 rigs paid for in cash by guys who used to be software architects. One vet in Western Montana told me he did 40 on site cattle calls last year and never once wrote a bill to a woman. He now only accepts payment in silver, diesel, or venison. He said his tax return has never been simpler. Even the funeral industry is shifting. Cremation rates among men in these demographics are approaching 100%. No one wants a $15,000 casket funeral attended by an ex wife who will spend the reception telling everyone he was emotionally unavailable. The new standard is simple: wrap the body in a wool blanket, dig the hole with a backhoe on your own land under the pines your brothers planted the year you arrived, lower the body, say a few words about the man he was, drink whiskey around the fire until sunrise, scatter the ashes in the trout pond. Cost: one bottle of bourbon and a tank of diesel. The men call it going home the old way. The women who show up late, because someone always does, are handed a shovel and told they are welcome to help fill the hole if they want to be part of it. Most decline. That is how boundaries are taught now, quietly, kindly, immovably. The language itself is changing, and men no longer say, I'm single. They say, I'm complete. They no longer say, I'm taking a break from dating. They say, I'm cured. They no longer say, women are difficult. They say, peace is non negotiable. The new vocabulary is short, precise, and final. There is no room for debate because there is no longer any need for persuasion. The proof is in the lived example, and the example is spreading faster than any manifesto ever could. I want to show you what the end game looks like when it is done right. There is a valley in central Idaho that 15 years ago was national forest, then grazing lease, then nothing. Today it is home to 63 men who collectively owning 9,400 contiguous acres under a single conservation easement trust that can never be broken into lots smaller than 100 acres and can never be sold to anyone who has not lived there for 5 consecutive years. They call it the Valley. Nothing else. No website, no sign on the county road, just a cattle guard and a gate that is always open because no one is coming who has not already been vetted for a decade. They run 400 head of cattle, a sawmill, a gravel pit, a machine shop, a small hydro plant on the creek, and a private airstrip with 4,000 feet long. Every man has his own cabin, his own shop, his own garden, his own solar array. They meet every Thursday night in the lodge for steak, bourbon, and silence if they want it. They have a trauma surgeon, a dentist, two mechanics who can rebuild a Cummins from scratch, a former Green Beret medic, a blacksmith, a brewer, and a guy who used to design nuclear submarines and now only designs off-grid wastewater systems. They have zero debt between them. They have zero crime. They have zero drama. They have a wait list of 312 men who would sell their soul to get in and will never get the chance. Because the existing 63 will not vote yes unless the new man is willing to bleed for the place first. Last year, a wildfire came within 2 miles. 63 men and 14 bulldozers stopped it cold in 8 hours. The Forest Service showed up the next day to thank them and left, shaking their heads. The valley already had its own fire department, its own water, its own everything. It always will. That valley is not unique. It is the template. There are now 47 known valleys, ridges, or plateaus and deserts where the same thing is happening or has already happened. The men building them are not waiting for permission, for collapse, or for women to change their minds. They are simply building the world they were told did not exist and then living in it. The women who finally realize what is happening go through the stages faster now. Denial lasts about a week, anger lasts a month, bargaining lasts 6 months, courses, coaches, TikTok apologies, trad wife cosplay. Then comes the final stage, silence of their own. Some move on, some do not. A few, very few, are invited in as guests, never owners, and only if they bring rare skills and zero entitlement. The ones who are invited stay. The ones who are not leave quieter than they came. There is no hatred in any of this. That is the part outsiders can never grasp. There is only preference. Strong, calm, non negotiable preference for peace over drama, competence over complaint, brotherhood over bureaucracy, silence over slogans. The men are not punishing anyone, they are simply done being punished. And the punishment has ended so completely that most of them do not even notice when the old world finally falls over. They will be too busy planting next year's garlic, rebuilding a transmission, or flying a buddy into the backcountry to fish for a week. They will hear about the collapse the same way they hear about a thunderstorm in a state they no longer live in. Interesting, but not relevant. I want to leave you with the last image I carry in my head every day now. It is dusk in a high mountain valley somewhere west of the Rockies. 23 plumes of chimney smoke rise straight up into cold, clean air. 23 cabins, 23 shops, 23 men who used to live in cities and now live exactly where they want. One of them is playing a fiddle on his porch. Another is welding something that sparks orange against the snow. A third is walking back from the pond with a stringer of trout. A pack of dogs runs loose and happy between the cabins because every dog there was rescued from a shelter by a man who understands loyalty. There is laughter, the smell of pine and steak and wood smoke, the low rumble of a generator shutting down for the night because the solar banks are full. No one is rushing, no one is arguing, and no one is performing it. No one is apologizing. They are just living. And if you stand on the ridge above that valley at full dark, you can see 23 individual lights flicker on, warm, small, defiant, content. 23 lights that will still be burning when every city to the east and west has gone dark. Those lights are the new civilization, not because they hate the old one, because they outgrew it. The silence is complete now, and it is the most beautiful sound I have ever heard. All roads lead to MWA. There is no map back. There never will be. Cheers. Now, what did you think about all of this? Do you agree with what I laid out here today? Drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts, your stories, your plans. I read every single one. If this hit home, do me a solid, like the video, subscribe if you haven't, and share it with one man who needs to hear he's not crazy for wanting peace. And just remember, brothers, all roads lead to MWA. Men walking away. Cheers.
Nothing says you care like crypto. Nothing can compare. Nothing says you care like crypto. Oh, nothing can compare to crypto.